past now. So I think we should get started. My name is Maggie Breen. I serve as the North Central and Northeast Region Missionary, and I facilitate is not quite the right word. I made sure that these resolution calls happened. So I arranged for all of the dates with the facilitators, and I'm hosting the Zoom calls to make sure that they record appropriately. Because they're recording automatically, I have to keep my microphone on. Otherwise, I think the sound like doesn't record, which is not helpful when trying to record a video. But I will stay quiet. And if you have technical questions, you can feel free to ask them because I'll be here listening, or you can drop them in the chat and I'll do my best to help. But that's all I wanted to say, and I'll turn it over to Don and Linda.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. And Maggie, thank you for to you and Deb Tickle for organizing this. I think it's a wonderful thing. I am co-convener of the Reparations Task Force. Why a picture of Donald Trump just came in my screen, I have no idea. Co-convener of the Reparations Task Force, and Linda Spires. Why don't you introduce yourself, Linda?
So I'm Linda Spires. I'm retired clergy in the diocese, and I am co-convener of the Title IV resolution. Title IV task force, where we're looking at racial bias within Title IV, the way that we use Title IV in Connecticut.
And Linda is also, you're part of the steering committee for the Racial Healing, Justice, and Reconciliation Network as well.
On the court team for that. Thank you. Yeah. And
I'm an active part of that. I'm not on the steering committee. So we have the two task forces and the network have sponsored 3 resolutions along with others. Why don't we take them in order? And number 5 is appropriation of $20,000 for historical analysis of Episcopal Church in Connecticut endowments, and to support congregations desiring to join in the work of racial reparations. As on the Reparations Task Force, one of our biggest issues, our task has been twofold, really. One, to research the history of racism and anti-Black bias and support of and benefiting from slavery in the Diocese of Connecticut. And secondly, having documented that as much as we can, to try to start thinking about how we might repair the breach in terms of financial reparations and putting a price tag on that. The very notion of putting a price tag on a human life is gross. But at some level, that needs to be part of our calculus, if for no other reason than those people who are ambivalent or don't understand why reparations are important. It's important to at least try to the extent it's possible, to establish some dollar figures. The other side of that, of course, is the human toll of that. And you can't put a value on a human life. And so our task is really one that is not just numbers, but it's a human story, and how to translate that into 2023 acts and financial reparations is somewhat of a task. Resolution 5 asks the diocese to commit $20,000 to seeking to seek to find out the origins of the ECCT endowments, and that involves digging back to the historical records, back to the beginning of the diocese, to look at who donated those funds, what they donated them to and for, and to what extent those were the fruits of either the slave trade, and we know a number of parishes in the diocese had slave traders as founding members, or the the use of the labor of enslaved people, for example, to building churches, as happened in Brooklyn, and probably places like Portland, where there was that brownstone all came out of the Portland quarry, and guess who was working in those quarries? Um, or the actual, well, and that would be it. So that either the actual slave trade or from the labor of enslaved people. So $10,000 of that is for the diocese to be able to look through its own records, and we'll look for an accountant experienced in forensic accounting to look back and see the sources and the approximate amounts that can be attributable to that. And we've been working with our diocesan canon for finance in terms of how that hire would go and what that person would do. And obviously that person would coordinate with our diocesan archivist as well to look through those records. The second $10,000 is for, on a much smaller scale, obviously, for individual congregations who believe that their endowments historically or at present may have been the fruit of either the labor of enslaved people or the profits from the slave trade, to investigate their own financial histories and to determine what, if anything, is attributable to those sources. That part is totally voluntary. Nobody's being singled out. But there are a number of congregations who, in looking through their parish histories, are concerned that their endowments may have been beneficiaries of either the labor of enslaved folks or contributions and charitable contributions from enslavers and people who engaged in the slave trade. So that $10,000 will be available to assist those parishes in hiring a similar type of person to look through their records and help them come to some conclusions about the sources of their own endowment. And that's basically it. Any questions on that?
Yeah, I do have one, and it sort of pertains to most of these discussions about enslaved peoples, and that is the inclusion or not of Native Americans in this search.
Thank you, Jill. That was beyond the scope of the reparations task force's charge. However, we are mindful that since the reparations task force was started, that has become a thing in the diocese. And so I think we certainly will be cognizant of that. How that would work, I'm not quite sure, because the reparations task force was charged with pretty exclusively the issue of bondage and enslavement of Black people.
Yeah, in its connection to the transatlantic slave trade.
But we're aware of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we're aware of that, and as this is way beyond my scope to say this, but I can imagine that as that reparations fund grows, we may find a way to apply that. But that it wasn't technically part of our charge.
Right. I was just checking so that I was clear about which specific group we're looking at, because this is a very it's a large topic. Yeah.
Sure, and I see you're from southeastern Connecticut, particularly.
I am
in your area. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Other questions on that?
Hi, Carrie Combs, Trinity Torrington. My question is, where did the $20,000 number come from? And how what's the sort of anticipated cost per parish to engage such services? Obviously, the endowments of an individual parish are much smaller, I assume, maybe than the diocese. So is that scaled appropriately? And what was the input in coming up with that number?
Yeah, the original $10,000 came from an estimate from Rosanna in talking to a forensic, it was an accountant that's asked, not necessarily a person we're going to hire, but to get a ballpark idea. That was Rosanna's estimate that would probably be a good number, at least for starters. And then we just, again, you kind of alluded to this. We're assuming that congregational endowments would be less complex to chart. And so we're thinking that would cover probably 3 or 4 congregations that want to investigate their own endowments.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Did it on resolution 5?
Mm-hmm.
All right, why don't we move on to resolution 6? And this is the major one that we have proposed. And the title is Acknowledging the 175th Anniversary of the Abolition of Slavery in the State of Connecticut and Creating an Episcopal Church in Connecticut Reparations Fund. Slavery was legal in Connecticut until 1848. For those of you who are seeing these online, there's about 10 whereas clauses that are part of this. And if you go on to the online resolutions, you'll see, I think it's called supporting documents or something like that.
Yeah.
And you will see all of those there. But it's clear that the first person of color who was enslaved arrived in Connecticut via the West Indies in 1638. Connecticut didn't block the importation of enslaved people until 1774. In 1784, they began a gradual emancipation of folks, but it didn't include adults. It was children born after a certain date, and then it was phased in over time. 1844, the governor attempted to pass legislation to abolish slavery. The legislature didn't pass it. And finally, in 1848, they did an act to prevent slavery. And that's when legal slavery ended. Needless to say, the after effects of that and the discrimination that followed that couldn't be legislated. The last enslaved person surviving was a woman by the name of Nancy Toney, who died in 1857 in Windsor, where I am serving right now, marking the end of more than 200 years of chattel slavery in Connecticut. And the churches in Connecticut, the diocese as a whole, we know benefited from the institution of slavery, be it congregations that were largely started or co-founded by slave traders. We know that more than half of the clergy in the 1830s owned slaves in the state of Connecticut. And so we are attempting to take this 175th anniversary as kind of a focal point to draw our attention to acknowledge that truth, and secondly, to follow through on what we did in 2020, which was to acknowledge our own culpability in the cross-Atlantic slave trade and benefiting from it, and to try to repair the breach from that. So it sets up a modest, right now, sum of $2.5 million, which is, interestingly, a tithe, an Old Testament tithe, 10% approximately of our unencumbered endowed funds in the Diocese of Connecticut, and then looks to continue to fund that reparations fund each year by the diocese contributing 10% of its annual draw on the unrestricted trusts in the diocese, and also to contribute to that fund 3% of the assessments that come from ECCT parishes each year, from the assessments the parishes pay to the diocese. And the goal is to have that, to continue that practice until at least until the corpus of the fund reaches $12 million. And the next resolve is that the resolution creates a board consisting of the bishops and representatives on the Mission Council, the Reparations Task Force, the Task Force on Racism, the Title IV Task Force for shorthand, and the Racial Healing, Justice, and Reconciliation Ministry Network, and also members of the Donations and Bequests Board, which kind of governs our investments. And that board going forward would determine the nature of reparations that could be paid and how to administer that fund. And calls upon that board to meet over the coming 18 months to continue to educate folks in the diocese about the purpose of the fund and gain support for it. And hopefully get private and congregational contributions to that fund as well. And finally, we're setting up, it didn't happen in 2023, which is actually the 175th anniversary. But we were planning on for Martin Luther King Jr. Day weekend in 2024 for a celebration at the cathedral, probably on a Sunday evening, to recognize this 175th anniversary. And again, to draw attention to the existence of the fund and encourage support of it. And I think I will stop there and take any questions.
I think this is just an opinion. I think education of the parishes is crucial to this, so that we're working to the same purpose. Yeah.
So I can't tell you how important that is, and frankly, that has been the reparations task force has been torn because that resolution 7, if you may recall, from 2020, set forth a whole bunch of things that the congregations are supposed to be doing, so that everybody becomes educated and aware of the issues, and that's just been painfully slow. And we all get it, but that's been painfully slow. And one of the reasons we decided to pull the trigger, if you will, this year on setting up the fund is we saw no close in end in sight for that kind of slow progress. And so, we've been saying all along that first comes the recognition that there has been a breach, and then penitence for that breach, and then resolve to repair that breach. And it's hard to get to stage 2 and 3 when you haven't gone through stage 1 yet. But we think at this point it's been 3 years, and it's time, and that maybe this will move this process along and the conversation along. Thanks for that question. It was really important to the whole process. I will say, Jill, also that we have planned for 2024 in cooperation with the Connecticut, Connecticut Human Rights and Opportunities Commission. They have trained facilitators, and again, thanks to Maggie and Deb Tickle, we are arranging for a series of open houses that will be professionally facilitated in the regions in 2024. Jill just shifted to my lower left page. And those will be opportunities for folks from congregations in the regions to engage the conversation, ask questions, and hear more information.
Excellent. That's good. Yeah. I see a hand up.
Don, you got a question from Carrie.
Hi, could you speak more about where the proceeds of the funds will go?
Yes, in generalities, because that will be the function of the board. But a couple of, obvious possibilities. On the task force is a gentleman who is experienced in working with the Black business community and one of our former regional missionaries actually left to work in an organization in the New Haven area that helps develop and encourage and support Black entrepreneurship. So one possibility might be, for a portion of the fund, might be to provide low interest, short-term loans for business investment and development. Another obvious thing that we've talked about is there are 3 Episcopal historically Black colleges and universities in the nation. And those now are incredibly popular for young Black students, particularly first generation college attendees to attend. And so providing scholarships to ECCT youth who want to attend those HBCUs would be another, low-hanging fruit, obvious possibility. Once the fund's in existence, I'm sure other opportunities and possibilities will exist, but those are 2 that have been talked about.
Thank you.
I apologize for the noises in the background if you're hearing them. We're currently having more guttering installed for my rain harvesting.
It would be very soothing if we were hearing that, but we're not hearing a thing, Jill. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions on this resolution? All right, Linda, you want to take number 7?
I will. Thank you, Don. So this one is from the Racial Healing, Justice, and Reconciliation Ministry Network. In 2018, there was a resolution put forward to ask parishes to create an addendum to the parochial report and let us know what kinds of things they are doing with regard to unlearning racism. And we use that information to base some of the programs that we were offering within the Racial Healing, Justice, and Reconciliation Ministry Network. And now the Episcopal Church has added to the parochial report questions very similar to what we were asking in the addendum. So this resolution is asking that that addendum be excluded and no longer needed. So this is a good news for, I'm sure, clergy and others who are involved in parochial report gathering will celebrate this particular resolution. So that's the nature of it, and it's a fairly simple one. I wanted to just say a word or two about, if you noticed in all 3 of these resolutions, the submitters are the 3 task forces that are, well, not 2 task forces in one ministry network. The task force course on reparations, the task force on Title IV disciplinary action, and then the Racial Healing, Justice, and Reconciliation Ministry Network. The co-conveners of these 3 groups are meeting with the bishops on a regular basis. And Don, you probably have more that you could add to that, but we're wanting to make sure that we're coordinating and really all working toward similar goals with regard to racial healing and any reparations that will be coming out of this work. So you see a lot of similar names on all these resolutions, mainly because they're listing the names of the bodies of these groups, and then some others who have expressed interest from the wider Racial Healing, Justice, and Reconciliation Network. So I just wanted to point that out in case that that seemed a little different for you. So Don, do you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah.
Discussion?
Yeah, just
With the bishops?
yeah, and it is, we're, you know, three groups chart with three different charges, but all kind of in the same, swimming in the same water. And
Yeah.
so we've been meeting regularly and a couple of times within the last year with the bishops and canons as well, to make sure that our work is in alignment with the diocesan leadership, and perhaps more importantly, that they're behind our work. So at the last meeting, Lena Howell, who is co-convener, Dean Lena Howell from the Cathedral, who is co-convener of the network, suggested we dub ourselves the Justice League. So that's our in-house name for ourselves. But yeah, it's been tremendously fruitful for the six of us to meet together along with the canon for mission advocacy, just to make sure we're all pulling in the same direction and not working across purposes.
I took a little detour away from that last resolution. Did anyone have any questions about that? Doing away with that little piece of work that was required, which was helpful to us in the network. And now we don't see any point in replicating that work, since the wider church is asking for the same similar information.
I think it was useful at the parish end to hold our feet to the fire, to actually do something and not be either in denial or just slough it off, basically, thinking we have other more important things to do. This is fundamental to what we do. So it's been helpful. Though I imagine there's quite a wide variety of response to actions at the parish level. I know in my own parish it's been pretty minimal, despite our best efforts.
And I think actually that to that point, the ECCT addendum was pretty bland. I mean, if you could submit it and you could say nothing, and you literally the words nothing, and you would be in compliance with the resolution. The tech addendum is really detailed, and gets filed with tech as well as ECCT. So I think we're going to wind up with actually much better information about what the churches are doing, and it will allow us, not in a punitive kind of way, but in a helpful, supportive kind of way, to reach out to those congregations that clearly are not doing much, if anything, and say, how can we assist you in doing this work? Because I know there's a lot of rectors who get heat when they bring this issue up. And it's always when you've got an outside person coming in to preach, or an outside person coming in to provide a workshop or something, that's always a different dynamic. And, you know, there's the old politics in the pulpit thing. And, you know, we need to understand that it's not politics. This is gospel, good news we're talking about here. It's central to our mission as a church, to make the body of Christ whole. So for all those reasons, you know, I think this is a positive step, and it gets rid of something that people in the state of Connecticut hated to do, that addendum. But now it's part of the tech parochial report, so we get that, and that information will be freely shared with the two task forces and the network.
And it's good to know that we're part of the greater movement. We're not sort of burrowing along on our own as the ECCT. That this is a
yes,
church-wide concern. Yeah,
agreed. Thank you.
Yeah. Though I do, I do, I do applaud the ECCT for willingly taking this on. It's been a expanding few years to have to give time to thinking through some uncomfortable things, but also how that leads us into greater mission of Christ. That to me has been it's a shot in the arm, because we've been doing this together and not trying to do it, in a little hole somewhere by ourselves.
Well, and to that point, Joe, we are part of there's a provincial group of people working on reparations, of which I and my co-convener are a part. So we've been meeting and we find out what they are doing. And I will confess that some of the dynamics of how we fund this, we stole from the Diocese of Massachusetts, who a year ago passed a similar resolution. And it seemed to work for us as well. So
Yeah.
I want to give credit where credit is due. We did not come up with that on our own.
But thank you for actually taking the baton and running with it.
Yeah. So what parish are you a member of?
I'm in St. David's, Gales Ferry.
Ah, okay, great.
Yeah.
I just want to know how we can find you if we need to.
Yeah, I also serve on disciplinary board.
So you know Linda. Okay.
Yeah.
He's actually president of the disciplinary board, so.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Thanks to Linda's.
Grateful for your work as well.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for your mentorship. But we don't do this alone, do we?
No.
Mm.
And Emily, where are you still with us?
I am. I'm a transitional deacon in the diocese, just trying to learn more, show up to as much as I can.
Okay, where are you serving?
I'm actually serving in Poughkeepsie, New York, but I'm canonically resident in Connecticut for the time being.
Okay, great. We're glad to have you with us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good to be here.
I thought I recognized that name, Emily. I was Cecil Tegatenga's one of his presenters.
Ah, I see. Nice.
Well, any other questions from folks?
This has been helpful. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for attending.
Coming.
Yeah.
Look forward to seeing you all at convention.
Yes. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yes, Maggie.
I'm here. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. I think we seem to be about ready to wrap up, unless there's something else for the good of the order.
Wonderful. As soon as you all leave, the recording will leave or end, and Stacy will have access to it. She'll probably do a little light editing because I did open the Zoom room significantly early. So there could be like 20+ minutes of me randomly cleaning my office that no one needs to watch because I wasn't sure what time people were going to show up. So but I don't know where that they'll be stored. I assume that the recordings would be on their convention website, but I don't want to make that assumption because I don't actually know. But if I hear differently, I'll be sure to be in touch with folks and let them know where these recordings can be found if you want to circle back and listen to them later.
Great.
Cool.
Thank you. That's good. Yeah.
Thanks, Maggie, for
Maggie, thanks for hosting, and Jill and Emily, thanks for being on.
Yeah. Thank you all. Yeah.
Look forward to seeing you at convention.
blessings.
Peace.
Take care.
God bless.